Prynhawn da i chi gyd, a diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am ymuno gyda ni ar gyfer ein gweminar heddi i gyflwyno i chi sut i oruchwylio prawf yn y cartref o bell gan ddefnyddio'r we ar gyfer ein cymwysterau sgiliau hanfodol. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar to introduce our test at home remote invigilation service using web delivery for our essential skills qualifications. Hoffwn nawr eich trosglwyddo i Amanda Kelly yn reolwr diwydiant ar gyfer mathemateg a Saesneg mwyn eich tywysg trwy y sleidiau nesaf. I would now like to pass you over to Amanda Kelly, who's our Industry Manager for Maths and English, who will guide you through the next slides.
During this webinar, we will cover the background to the solution and explain how it works and some of the key requirements and expectations, together with the guidance that is available. So, let's take a look at our interim remote invigilation solution and how it works. You can see from the image on this slide that the candidate is on the left and the invigilator is on the right. The candidate needs a Windows laptop or PC with a forwards-facing camera. They also need a second device such as a smartphone or a tablet, and this can be Android or Apple. The invigilator, working remotely, will have access to either a laptop or PC and will have secure access in order to administer the exam. The candidate and the invigilator will agree on the software that they will use to invigilate the session. There are 3 choices at the moment: GoToMeeting, WebEx or Teams, and we have put together candidate and invigilator guidance on how to use those platforms. So once agreed, the invigilator will send a meeting appointment to the candidate for the date the test is booked on. Through the meeting software, the invigilator will be able to see the candidate through the front-facing camera and also the learner's environment through the second device. As we will be monitoring live assessments taking place for quality assurance purposes, you will see the exam auditor sitting in the bottom right of the illustration. So if we select a test for monitoring, the invigilator will be asked to share the meeting appointment with the exam auditor, and they will join the session. It is very important to note that the session must not be recorded by either the invigilator or the candidate. So, just to summarise some of the key steps. Firstly, the centre must receive approval to offer remote invigilation for Essential Skills Wales qualifications from City and Guilds. Once that's in place, you book the exams as normal through Walled Garden. The centre arranges an online meeting using either Teams, GoTo or WebEx for the same date as the exam, and the invigilator and candidate share that meeting appointment, obviously making sure that they are both okay with the chosen meeting software. The online meeting appointment might need to be shared with City and Guilds on request for quality assurance purposes if we decide to audit that particular test. The invigilator will start the meeting with the candidate on the day of the test and run through the setup checks and all the steps documented in our detailed centre guide. The invigilator shares the URL link to the test, and they would also share the one-time user key code and PIN code, and then the candidate takes their test. To make things easier for the candidate and the invigilator, we've produced detailed guidance and checklists to help them step through the process. For the candidate, there are 4 stages, and for the invigilator, there are 5. You will see by looking across the 2 columns in this table, the actions in each step largely mirror each other. We therefore recommend, before the exam takes place, that there is a session for the invigilator to check with the candidate on some key points. Firstly, that they have both read and understood the instructions in the checklists. that the area the candidate is taking the test in is clear and set up correctly, that both parties are clear about the declaration and what is required, and that the meeting software that is going to be used has been agreed and downloaded as necessary. Also, checks around equipment generally and things around exam conditions. At the start of the exam, the invigilator needs to complete some environment and security checks with the candidate. They will also check for things such as unauthorised equipment or resources or materials. The invigilator will need to verify that the candidate is who they say they are, which is done through an authentication and photo ID. Then, before the exam starts, the invigilator will share the necessary link to the test, provide the access codes and the PIN number. During the exam, the invigilator must spend 100% of the time focusing on invigilation. It is not possible for them to carry out any other activity while they are invigilating the exam. At the end of the exam, the candidate needs to confirm that they have finished, and the invigilator needs to check that the final question has been uploaded to the system and has been marked complete with a little green tick. After that, the invigilator will check again with the candidate that the area is clear and that any scrap paper used has been properly destroyed. Then both candidate and invigilator complete the declarations. After the exam, there's also a centre declaration, which is usually completed by the exams officer or someone in a similar role. Before you can get up and running exams in this way, there are some important documents and instructions that everybody must be familiar with. This range of documents is designed to support centres with delivering test at home essential skills exams. There is a training deck which can be shared with your teams to support preparation for delivery of these exams. There is a booking process guide, together with a guide about using Kineo Locker. This is the system you will use to submit exam bookings for this interim solution, together with a booking form for remotely invigilated exams. There is a centre guide and 2 checklists, one for the invigilator and one for the candidate. There are a set of candidate instructions, and there are also a set of instructions, one for each for the invigilator and for the candidate, about using various conferencing platforms during the exam. There are instructions for using Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting and WebEx. We are conscious that many learners may have had breaks in their learning. So, ahead of booking an exam, please remember that learners do need to feel ready and fully prepared for the exam, as well as having all the required equipment and materials. The invigilator has a number of key responsibilities, exactly as they would have if they were conducting a face-to-face examination. It is their responsibility to ensure that the test is conducted safely and in line with the instructions. It is the head of centre's responsibility to ensure that invigilators are appropriately trained, are available and that they meet the requirements stated here. The invigilator must be focused on this duty at all times and not be carrying out any other task at the same time. The invigilator can only invigilate for one candidate at a time, and the invigilator must not be a tutor for the subject being examined. Relatives, friends and/or peers of the candidates must also not act as invigilators for the exams. Invigilators will need to be familiar with Evolve Secure Assess and be able to administer tests, for example, issuing key codes, PIN codes and, where necessary, pausing the test. The Centre Guide also provides full details around access arrangements, and, as with all exams, these must be agreed ahead of the examination taking place. If the candidate is using any assistive software, they should practice using it in advance with the navigation test to make sure that it is compatible. City and Guilds will complete exam audits to ensure that centres are following the instructions. For remote invigilation, this would include observing a remotely invigilated test as a third attendee in the virtual meeting session. City and Guilds will ask centres to provide details of the planned exams as part of their booking process, and they will then select which ones will be audited. Where exam audits identify incidences of non-compliance, City and Guilds will indicate these in feedback to the centre, along with improvement actions and timescales for these to be completed. City and Guilds will follow up exam audits to ensure that any actions have been completed. In serious cases of non-compliance, these will be reported to our internal team for further investigation. To support you with quality-related queries, we have set up a new inbox, fsremote@cityandguilds.com. This is, however, for quality-related issues only. All other questions should be referred to our customer service team. The next slides cover some key points of delivering remotely invigilated essential skills tests at high level. It is vital to check that the candidate has access to equipment that meets the minimum technical requirements to allow them to access the tests. The equipment needs to be fully charged if battery life is required to complete the exam session. The candidate should undertake a navigation test before the exam to familiarise themselves with the exam experience. A reminder that candidates and invigilators need to have read and understood the following documents in order to prepare for the exam: the centre guide for the invigilator and the candidate instructions for the candidate, the relevant checklists and guides to using the chosen conferencing software during the test. Candidates must complete the essential skills confirmatory test under the same conditions as they would if there was an invigilator in the room with them. The candidate, on joining the meeting on the mobile device, must ensure that the invigilator can see the test environment and can confirm that they are taking the test safely and securely. Also, that they are not receiving any outside assistance during the test or using any unauthorised equipment or material. We have talked about the different stages that lead up to the test. We suggest that it's important to have a pre-meeting or discussion with the candidate before the test takes place. This will allow for equipment checks and to explain about unauthorised materials and remind the candidate about the session not being recorded. The candidate needs to be able to bring some photographic ID, but it is the centre's responsibility to confirm the identity of the candidate so that the invigilator will be able to verify this. The centre guide gives more detail around the types of photo ID that are acceptable for this purpose. Before the exam starts, there are a number of security checks that need to take place. Confirming that the candidate does not have access to any unauthorised materials, and that the invigilator is able to see the environment clearly. The invigilator will also need to confirm with the candidate that they will not be interrupted during the test and that no one will enter the room, and they would know what to do should an emergency occur. The candidate needs to confirm that they understand that they are now under exam conditions. Before the exam starts, both the candidate and the invigilator join the virtual meeting and enable their webcams and microphones. The candidate should remove their watch if they're wearing one and place it on the desk. The candidate must confirm that they have all the required materials, and the invigilator must remind them of the exam conditions. The URL for the exam is shared and the candidate launches the exam. The Evolve key code is entered by the candidate, who then checks that the title of the exam and the details are correct. They enter the PIN and the exam begins. During the exam, The invigilator must be 100% focused on the exam and not carrying out any other activity. The exam session should not have any breaks and should be uninterrupted. The invigilator should be aware of how to manage any emergencies or technical issues and be familiar with guidance around malpractice. There are also some things that an invigilator must not do. They must not read or rephrase any question for the candidate or explain them. They must not direct candidates to particular sections or questions in the exam, or make comment about possible mistakes in the exam unless specifically directed to do so by City and Guilds. If an invigilator suspects that there's an error in the test, they should continue to conduct the test as normal and report their concerns to City and Guilds as soon as possible after the exam has been completed. The invigilator should turn off their camera and microphone during the exam, but the candidates must remain on so that the invigilator can supervise during the exam. Once the exam has been completed and the candidate has confirmed that they have finished, the invigilator needs to confirm that the exam is marked as complete in the Secure Assess system. This can be done by checking the green tick against the exam. If not, there are processes in place to support. Our customer services team will be able to help you, but make sure you let them know that your query relates to remote invigilation so that they can deal with it quickly for you. Finally, at the end of the exam, you need to ensure that both the candidate and invigilator checklists are complete and their declarations are completed. In addition, the centre declaration needs to be done, and these documents must be retained by the centre for 6 months. Hopefully that gives you a feel for how remote invigilation works, as well as an idea at a high level of the controls and instructions that surround the process. So, what next? If you would like to go ahead with the Essential Skills Test at Home remote invigilation solution, you will need to apply for centre approval before you can go ahead and deliver tests in this way. You can find the application form from the link on our COVID-19 pages on the website. Once you are approved, we will inform you in writing and advise you of the date from which you can start to deliver tests in this way. We will send you the password in order that you can access all the guidance documents on the website. Make sure you and your learners have the required technology and are confident to complete confirmatory tests in this way, and that your invigilators have been trained in Secure Assess. Agree which meeting software you will use with candidates, and then you can start booking tests. Our customer services team have all been trained to support you, and you can contact them by phone or email. And as I mentioned earlier, it's useful to flag up your query that it's in connection with remote invigilation so that we can help you quickly. If you have a query relating to quality delivery for remote invigilation, you can email our new inbox, fsremote@cityandguilds.com.
Hoffwn diolch yn fawr iawn i Amanda am ein tywys trwy'r sleidiau a dangos y broses mor glir i ni. I'd like to thank you to Amanda for showing us the process so clearly. Os oes gennych unrhyw ymholiadau neu unrhyw gwestiynau, yna gallwch gysylltu gyda fsremote@cityandguilds.com neu centresupport@cityandguilds.com. If you do have any inquiries or any queries or any questions at all, then please contact us on fsremote@cityandguilds.com or centresupport@cityandguilds.com. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Thank you very much.